So I want to pull back a little bit because you mentioned earlier that you got interested in strength when you were young. And I want you to paint the picture of how you came to find out about strength, or how you found out about strength, and then how you got interested in it, and if there was anyone around you that was doing it or who inspired you, and kind of how old you were.
So I lived in Seoul, South Korea when I was like just barely becoming, a teenager. I was 13 years old when I moved there. And it was crazy. I moved to Seoul, South Korea from this, small area in North Carolina. So definitely a culture shock, moving halfway across the world to like one of the most densely populated cities on the planet was something, interesting, special, right? And so I got to Korea and I was just kind of like, okay, I'm here. What the hell do I do? So I got into martial arts and, in Korea, Taekwondo is originated in Korea. And, that was a lot of fun. I was like, this is pretty kick ass, and I noticed I'm like, I'm really damn skinny. I want to be stronger, you know? So I saw one of my friend's dads over there. And to this day, still keep in contact, every now and then. And this guy was huge. I mean, this guy was like, you know, not like super tall. He was like average height, like 5'9", 5'8", but he weighed like 250, right? I mean, this guy was like huge, like muscular, huge. And I saw him with my own eyes because the way I did Taekwondo, it was upstairs, right? And downstairs was a weight room. And I went downstairs to the weight room and I saw him in there one day. And I saw him with my own eyes, bench press like an absurd amount of weight. It was definitely over 500 pounds because I counted the 5 plates on each side and there was some change there too. And he just hit it, like convincingly. And I was like, whoa. And yeah, there are people like that, in the military often, corner somewhere that exists. Um, and I was just like, I want to be like that. Holy shit. And he gave me some advice, on like on lifting, on getting bigger, on gaining mass and stuff like that. Um, and I started, going into the gym downstairs. I started lifting after, before and after Taekwondo practice, and I'd go online and I'd look at, you know, I'd read videos and forums and stuff like, or I'd watch videos and read forums and read articles. I used to watch a lot of like Gene Bell's lifting on YouTube. I used to watch some of Ian's lifting too. Ian Bell's lifting. I used to watch some of like the bodybuilders like Ronnie Coleman. I used to watch him train. I used to watch a lot of Johnny Candido's videos. Um, I was just doing everything I could to immerse myself into it. I'm like, I want to get bigger. I want to get strong. I want to be the guy, the man. 13-year-old me, right? And you know, and then I got into football like after eighth grade, and then started doing conditioning for that. I remember the first time I tried to do a barbell squat, in the weight room for football. I was like 14, 13 or 14. Uh, I loaded on 225 thinking, that I was hot shit and I shouldn't have a problem with it. And I got stapled by 225. you know, not afraid to admit it. Um, it was fun. It was fun though. But the craziest thing about it was I came back the next week and I still to this day don't know how I did it. But then I squatted 225 for 8 reps. Don't know how, still like to this day, don't know what happened, don't know how I got stapled, and then don't know how I did it for 8 reps the next week. Um, but at that point, quickly realized like, hey, maybe, you know, um, this is interesting. I was like, this is interesting. Let's game on, let's play. And from there, just took off. And then started lifting a lot. I really fell in love with it. I loved the process. I loved, I did not mind being patient for results, but really young then, so I was just getting strong quickly. Um, and it's just something I genuinely enjoyed. I mean, I met my best friend, um, in ninth grade in high school, and we started training and lifting together in the gym. We hell, there's nothing like training with your best friend. Being a teenager, it's the best. One of the best things in the world, and I just really fell in love with it.
Did you keep playing football, or did you just focus on lifting?
the lifting training part, I fell in love with. Football, I didn't really fall in love with it so much.
How long did you play it for?
A couple of years, and then I just realized like this really isn't something that I'm wanting to do. Like in college, I thought about it again, you know, but I was just like, you know, okay, so there were kind of like pivotal moments where I had to make decisions. Like in high school, I was moving around a lot. And the school that I went to, like I went to a different high school, my freshman, sophomore, and junior year. So there was no like sort of continuity and stuff like that. I kind of wanted to be like a part of the team, and really be engaged and want to be there and stuff. But I never really fell in love with football like I did with, with lifting, and even martial arts, which I really loved too. But with football, I thought I would. I thought it was the macho thing to do. I got into it. No, I'm not bad at it. I have the body for it. I have the stamina for it. I have the strength for it, and I'm not afraid, to hit or get hit, right? But at the same point in time, it's like it just wasn't something I fell in love with, and I knew in my heart that I didn't, you know. So stopped playing, continued lifting, focused on academics, did really well, got, in the college, got offered some powerlifting scholarships actually, which almost never happens. Um, but of course I declined. I turned those down to go to UTSA with my best friend. And then we both worked our asses off and got the Army scholarship there. Um, and then again in college, when I had that moment again, like, do I want to revisit football? Like I definitely think I could be really good at it now. But at the same point in time, I was just kind of like, at that point, it's sort of about priorities. I'm like, 19, 20 years old having this conversation with myself. I'm like, priorities. Where am I going to allocate time to? What matters the most to me? My training, my powerlifting does for sure. And I don't want to have to stop that at the risk of like doing football. As silly as it may sound to some, to me, it's what I loved. The Army, I was invested. I wanted to be in. I wanted to serve. So I wasn't going to give that up for football. And then academics, like I was thinking, flirting with the idea of pursuing, a doctoral degree and education beyond, higher education. And, if I wanted to focus on all those things, then there's no way I could also, feasibly do football and keep my body intact and, keep my sanity about me if I'm doing all those things. I mean, maybe there is, but again, I say that because if my heart's not in it, like my heart was in those other things, then, I would just be going through the motions there. I wouldn't be giving them all my effort. And then it's a waste of my time. So, ultimately I decided not to pursue that further.
When you're in high school, because I remember that's when you and I became buddies. But as far as being like back to the extrinsic side of the competition, um, who all were you like at the time? Like, were you worried about what other teams were doing, or were you trying to match up against the guys who were already, killing it in the open that were adults? Um, like, who all did you have your sights on?
It was definitely a mix of both. I definitely, like the junior lifting and stuff was pretty cool because at that time there were some pretty heavy hitters coming onto the scene. Like there was you, there was me, there were some other guys we know, like Dane Stedman in the 165, um, and there were some other pretty heavy dudes too. And then there were a lot of my friends, from high school that I knew in Texas that were heavy into it at the time, and they were very strong. And so there was definitely a lot of competition amongst just like those like teenagers and juniors already by itself. That was awesome. But I also, definitely always had open, like sort of in my mind and in the back of my mind. And I started competing open really early, just so I could immerse myself into it. I could see who I'm up against and see who I need to beat. So it was definitely a blend, a mix of both. Because at the end of the day, like I guess, it may be more subjective. Like some people care, about their team titles and stuff. Like me, like if I won team nationals or whatever, like I didn't really care too much about it if I got, fifth place in the open, if I was like 18 years old or 19 or something, or um, oh, you got first in juniors, but you got second in the open. To me, it's like cool, but I didn't show up or win where it counted or I wanted to, where I thought I should be. So, when I started winning open, it was cool. And I would just register for junior or teen sometimes just to, sweep along records and give the next, junior who's up and coming, give him a challenge. And I think that's how it should be.
So when you were, because obviously when you don't do steroids, it's a different game because, you see guys hop on drugs and all of a sudden the sky's the limit. But for you, as far as like setting your goals, did you ever have it in your mind of like, well, I'm natural, so I probably can't do as much, or did you just throw it out the window?
Oh yeah, I don't care, man. Like I'll even I would like, I compare, when I talked earlier about like comparing, or stacking myself up against others, I do it with untested lifters too. I don't care, Um, you name them, Um, some of them that I watch pretty closely right now. Shane Hunt in the 275 weight class. I watched Jamal Browner in the 242. My good friend Dan Griggs, I watch in the 275 right now. And there's Dawson. I think is he 242? I think he's 242 right now, light 242. Dawson Winham. And of course, John Hack, who does 198, has done 181. I think did a meet as those super light 220 once, just weighed in a little bit more, like 203 or something. Um, and I stack myself up with those guys too. I watch those guys too. For me, like I'm natural, whatever. But at the same point in time, um, if I want to compete and, be the best of the best and go against the best of the best, in my mind, in the back of my mind, I'm always like, if I can beat those guys, or if I can, stack up with those guys at the very least, if I can compete with them, then I'm like really doing something. So it gives me, definitely something to push really hard for, and to really give my all. And it stokes the fire, it adds more fuel to the flames. So yeah, the whole notion, of me being natural and others maybe or maybe not being natural, um, it doesn't really it doesn't really affect me too much. I mean, it's a factor like everything else, but at the same point in time, um, if I want to be the best, sometimes, like I compare myself to them too, anybody can get it.
What advice would you give to up and coming lifters, whether they're competing or just lifting that are natural, and sort of like how would you sort of speak to them as how to approach things?
Yeah, it's something that I would, especially for younger lifters who are just getting into it, and I think a lot of tested and untested lifters would agree on this unanimously, that have been in it for a while. Um, I would, like if you're younger, just stay away from the drugs, focus on actually, learning how to train, focus on actually, doing a competition, focus on actually, building a base and seeing where your body can take you, without enhancement. Focus, on just being patient and just, falling in love with the process and just really, finding, your love and passion for it, if you have it, I think a lot of people, you know, they see people like me, they see people like some of the untested lifters like Jamal, you know, um, put up, ridiculous, lifts and stuff, and they just want to be like us, so quickly and so fast. So many people are, I think, so used and so conditioned to, having things come to them quickly now, and people just don't seem patient to me. Like they don't seem as patient. They're very much in a rush to do things, and it's just kind of like, hey, like this is one of those things, that you don't want to rush because you might get broken if you do. You might get broken if you don't, but you definitely might if you do rush it. So take your time, do your homework, do your research, try different things, have fun. Um, go for a competition. Don't worry about, cutting weight at your first competition because you probably aren't going to be top 5 in the nation. So, um, what's the point of cutting weight if you're not actually, competing or going to win, unless you have health goals that you want to achieve, with losing some weight. Other than that, though, you shouldn't be cutting weight. You should be focused on gaining as much mass as you can, getting as much muscle as you can, getting as strong as you can. And then, once you see an opening, like to be competitive, then you could definitely consider, taking, like doing a weight cut to be competitive. But if you're not like even in that realm, like I wouldn't even be worried about it. Like I talk like, sometimes these kids come up to me at the gym, they're 17 years old, they're kids, and they're just like, oh, like I'm cutting down, 15 pounds for like this weight class, or 10 pounds or 12 pounds for this weight class. And I'm like, are you like top of the nation? Because I'm like, I literally just met you today and I've never heard of you before. That's no offense to them. But they aren't. And they're like doing these massive weight cuts and they're doing all this stuff and they're stressing themselves the hell out before they even step on the platform. And it's like, if that's your introduction into powerlifting, you stress yourself the hell out, you cut all this weight, you show up to the meet, you're flat, you're depleted, you're weaker than you normally are, and then you don't hit any of the numbers you want. And then you have, a bad day, and then you make a post about the day not going how you wanted. Like, that's how you're starting powerlifting. I mean, if you're a teenager and you want things to come to you quickly, or if you're a kid, you want things to come quickly, like that's not a good encouragement model to stay in the sport, or to give it a fair shot, I think. And I think that's something to think about for a lot of the younger lifters getting into it. Be humble, be patient, train, fall in love with it, have fun. When you compete, don't worry about weight cut, don't worry about being ultra, competitive at the time. Even if you are a competitive person naturally, like I get it, trust me, but just get in there, get your feet wet. My first meet, I wasn't worried about, um, being the best in the world or in the nation immediately. I went into it because I loved lifting, I loved the training, and I just wanted to try something different, and I fell in love with it. And then I got really, competitive and I started winning because I stuck around long enough and I worked hard enough and, probably decent genetics too. And all those things just sort of coalesced and, here I am. But yeah, stay away from drugs, have fun, fall in love with the process, find, your why for it. Um, when you do your first meet, don't freak out about being uber competitive. Don't freak out about weight cuts. Just get as big as strong as you can. Go in, lift weights, have fun, get a feel for the environment, get your feet wet. Um, but just those are a lot of things that I would recommend to a lot of the younger lifters. Patience being one of the biggest things.
When you say patience, what time frame are you thinking of when you describe that? Like weeks, months, years, decades? Where are we at?
Yeah. Good question. For a lot of the younger lifters, just because the powerlifting talent pool looks a lot different now than it did, 7 years ago, 6 years ago. Even when we were in high school, man, like the powerlifting talent pool now is just so much deeper than it used to be. Back then there were certainly heavy hitters like in our age range, but in the open, there were some, but it wasn't on the level that it is now, especially in drug tested powerlifting. It definitely
Mhm.
wasn't. Um, but now there's definitely more talent, more outliers in terms of like, muscle mass and freak strength and stuff like that are popping into the sport, and it's getting into a point where, coming in and winning the nationals like in your first year or two, is a lot less likely, especially in, like bigger weight classes. I don't generally watch like the really really light weight classes as often. Like I still watch, but I don't like follow them as intensely or deeply. So because they're not like really like competition, but I imagine it's probably the same story there. But I know for a lot of the bigger and larger weight classes, that's definitely the story. Um, so before and it will vary on the person. It'll vary on like their genetic ability. It'll vary on how intensely focused they are, how hard they work, and a lot of factors, I think. Some people can become pretty competitive relatively quick, especially if they've lifted weights already years before getting into powerlifting, or did athletics and sports and trained power for power all the time. Then the transition for them into powerlifting, I don't think is always as rocky. Like some people will watch other people compete, they'll put up like a pretty decent total, or a big deadlift or big squat, and it's just like, wow, like this is their first meet. They're just getting into powerlifting, and I'm like, that's true. But if they were in college athletics beforehand playing football, or something else, then chances are they probably squatted, deadlifted, benched, power clean. There's chances they lifted some heavy ass weight before. So it's not completely foreign, to some of them. Um, but people don't think about it that way. Um, so, just to circle back to your question, I think, there's a lot to consider. It could look very different for each individual person. Um, for me to win my first open title, for perspective, I won my first open nationals in 2017. I was 20 years old. I was a junior in high school, or junior in college, excuse me. And I started powerlifting when I was 16. So it took me 4 years from my first powerlifting meet to nationals in 2017. It took me 4 years to win my first open title. And I won my first team title, I believe, when I was 16. So I actually won it pretty much immediately. But again, the depth of competition in that drug tested meet for teens was a lot different back then than it is now. And it might be a lot harder
Mhm.
to pull that off now. So that's definitely a factor to consider. Um,
Do you keep up with teens anymore?
Not too much. I mean, like I don't look at like the records or anything. I don't really care too much, but because again, they're not like my direct competition. But if I see
Mhm.
like on like on Instagram or whatever, like if a team like puts up like a a big total or some big lifts, I'm impressed. Like I enjoy watching that stuff too. Seeing kids really like be engaged in it, and passionate about it, and they work hard in it. I'm just like, damn, like that's awesome. See, it's kind of like looking, looking into a mirror sometimes, or um, I think it's always pleasant to see for sure. Like I'm not obsessed, I don't care about like their records. I'm not a teenager, so I don't, but at the same point in time, watching them compete, watching them get that fire, they're young, they have all this vigor, they're ready to get after it. You love to see it, and sometimes it helps spark things for me too. Like I mean, I'm not old, like I just turned 25 a couple months ago, but at the same point in time, I'm not old, but my training age, been training for 12 years. I've been competing for 9 years. So, I've been around a lot longer than most competitors like in the sport right now. And when I see that stuff, it kind of lights a little bit of a fire in me too. So it's good.
You mentioned the injury risk of powerlifting. Powerlifting being, something that you're able to tolerate, whereas strongman might be a little bit more. So, how do you sort of quantify injury risk? And then where do you sort of like stack up the different sports as far as which one has the highest risk and which one doesn't?
It's been a while since I've looked at like studies and injury risks. And again, I think some of those studies I think may have like some I would really need to look at a lot of that literature again. It's honestly been quite a while. But the last time I had checked, I know powerlifting specifically has, compared to other sports, like an astronomically lower risk. However, I don't think that maybe those studies took into account like certain variables or factors like minor injuries or strains or tweaks or whatever, which happen like commonly for a lot of people all the time, just from like mostly from probably overuse or um past the recoverable threshold of like like volume and stimulus. So um at least with powerlifting, I know that, in my mind at least, the risk is low. And if I, mitigate outside factors as much as I can, which sometimes, can be difficult because of my lifestyle, but I'm also looking at what I can manage in the gym and what I do in the gym, and it's like I see some people who, frequently they have this term, like they say overshoot, like overshoot like a rate of perceived exertion in training or in powerlifting, And there's people that just I think go too far or do too much too suddenly or too fast. And that certainly leads to, injury and overuse. But for me, it's like I've become pretty comfortable with my body in powerlifting because I've done it for so long, and I know when I need to lighten the load a little bit, or when I need to add weight, or when I need to back off, or when and a lot of it is very if you can kind of get your body on a schedule, like a training schedule, you can start to notice patterns, and it can become like kind of cyclical, I think, a lot of the time, and you can actually start to predict things a lot better. And you'll be able to predict timeframes where you need to back off a little bit or push a little more aggressively. And that has really helped mitigate like really concerns with injuries in the past few years. Like I have, seldom actually gotten like injured. Um, and the only one I can think of is when I had pec strains in 2020. But that was more of actually a freak accident rather than it was just too much, I think, too much training because I was pretty well aware of like my limits at the time. Um, so I kind of chalked that up to just kind of bad luck and timing. That was more of an accident, but we were able to get through that, and it's never happened again. Pecs are as healthy as ever. Um, And if I ever, it's also, I think, the way that you think about injury, I'm like going off on a tangent right now. It's also like how you think about injury. Like, if you approach it with this mindset that this like catastrophic mindset, injury might be worse for you to manage or deal with, but if you feel a little tweak or a strain or whatever, the best thing to do usually is not to freak out. Um, and don't become completely like sedentary. Some people do that, and I don't think that always necessarily helps. Um, go in, a few days later when you're supposed to like squat again or bench again, like be mindful of the weight you're using and just do the movement again, and keep doing the movement. And usually when I do that, I find that, strains and stuff like that, if they ever occur, which they've occurred a couple times, they heal generally, within a few days or a few weeks and or a couple weeks. If you manage, the loads and stuff like that. And if you keep moving, and if you're not sedentary, still get in the gym, still exercise, but don't overdo it. But yeah, as far as injuries, so with all those things said, for powerlifting, for me personally, I know that the injury risk is low. For me, going into a completely new sport, the risk is definitely there because I may not necessarily have the sort of same grasp on my limits in that sport, if that makes sense. So I don't know if I'd be pushing too aggressively or not pushing as hard as I need to be. And it would take a little bit of time to fine tune that and adjust that. And I usually like to find that out for myself. So, in that beginning period, there probably will be a higher risk of injury. Plus, a lot of the events that are like done in strongman, I mean, I'm just talking kind of like face validity here. You look at some of that shit, you're like, damn, that could go wrong really quickly, and then you could probably get hurt. If we're being completely honest about it. And that's kind of one of the things where I'm just like, I don't know, like, is it worth it? Like, when I look at the whole package, like in terms of competitiveness, in terms of how lucrative it is for me, in terms of the time, in terms of am I gonna get hurt or broken doing this? If I look at all those factors all together, for me, strongman is not necessarily the sport that I'd want to do, even from an injury perspective. And I've seen a lot of people who do strongman, at least anecdotally, like online, that like have like these injuries and they get hurt really bad and it sets them back really far. And it's just, it happens in powerlifting too, but seeing it happen in strongman is tough because you're not just squatting, benching, deadlifting, you're doing like all these events, and these events like cycle off. And if something particular is hurting and it's aggravated by a certain event, and you still got to do all the other events over a series of days, then the chances of you getting hurt, or making it worse are pretty high. So it's also it's also a function of how the sport actually operates when you're competing in it too, is my point. So that's something to consider. Yeah.
How would you compare powerlifting and bodybuilding?
Uh, Bodybuilding is a beauty pageant, and powerlifting is about being strong. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, it's fair as far as like the injury risk.
That was a joke. Well, I think with bodybuilding, like in terms of like short-term injury, I'm not sure what that looks like. I would imagine that it's not particularly high. However, depending on where you compete in bodybuilding, if you're like making these major lifestyle changes and adjustments, like in terms of dieting and eating and getting to extremely low like body fat percentages and much lower body weight than you once were. And if you, it's a factor if you use a lot of drugs, that's another thing too. There's, nobody wants to address the elephant in the room, but, I'm going to go beyond short-term, like just say injuries here. There's been a sort of, and I'm not sure if this is an availability bias, I'm not sure if, just because these stories have been readily available that I think that they're occurring at higher, rates that they actually are. But, and you guys have probably seen it too, there's like the string of stories, where these bodybuilders, these competitive bodybuilders are dying, before they're, by their 50s or even earlier, in their 30s and their 40s, and a couple, I think, in their 20s too, male and female. And I've seen several stories now where that's been the case. And, again, let's address the elephant in the room. How many other sports is that happening in right now? So it's just something to think about. And again, with, the drug use, it's not like to scare you. I mean, I'm sure there's people that use drugs and are fine and live, long lives, but it's a factor, right? But those people, they you know they used and they lived extreme lifestyles to get extreme results. So there's that one side of it, but the other side of it is also the consideration for health and stuff like that. And I would like to have my health intact as much as possible. Thank you very much, despite you know the contradiction of joining the military. um, but I would like to keep my health intact. I'd like to be healthier when I'm older. I'd like to eventually have a family and have kids, and I want to be around for that. And I want to be able to throw ball with my son, or I um rest of my kids play around. Like I want to be able to do those things, and I don't want to be dead for sure, and I don't want to be just broken beyond sort of repair. um so with powerlifting versus bodybuilding, for me, powerlifting, since I've been in it for so many years now, and I'm very good with managing fatigue and knowing when to back off and knowing when to push a little more aggressively, it's actually better, I think, a lot better for my health than it is risky at this point. I'm just continually strengthening my bone density, my joints, my ligaments, my muscles. Um, I'm functional. Life is good, but with bodybuilding, you have to kind of do like these extreme things, a lot of times, especially before shows, and you see it all the time, especially if you want to win. And again, for me, if I'm getting to it, competitive sport, my goal is to be competitive and to win. It's not just to do it, you know. I wouldn't be there just to step on stage, look decent, take a few pictures, leave, and not do it, some people want to experience a bodybuilding show, that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying for me personally, I want to be competitive, I want to win. I'm not going to, you know, waste my time getting into something if I don't want if I don't want to be on the extreme end of it. So I feel like in bodybuilding, to be on the extreme end of it, probably involves drugs unless you do, drug free. And it probably involves, a pretty significantly unhealthy lifestyle at times, especially with regards to like eating behaviors and food, and even training as well. You know, um, so for me, I think that short-term injury risk, I'm not sure if it's a whole lot higher, and I'm not sure if in bodybuilding injury risk is, really as large a concern. It might be, but again, I'm not just well versed in it, so I don't want to speak on that. But I will say, you look at the string of deaths that have been occurring, and a lot of them, had a lot of mass, were very heavy, used a lot of drugs, and just a lot of different factors to consider there. So, while it's not, necessarily the mindset of, am I going to get hurt? It's also the mindset of, am I going to get dead? So, something to think about.
Do you think you have to? Do you think you have any risk or any sacrifices regarding your long-term health with what you're up to?
With powerlifting,
Yeah.
um, at the moment, not particularly. I think it's a lot more advantageous than it is risky or disadvantageous. Now, there is always the risk, with the loads that I do lift objectively, if I am being fair, that I could get hurt very badly. You know, all it takes is, one thing, to go catastrophically wrong while I'm squatting 800 pounds, and, that could be like a death sentence, because it's 800 freaking pounds. So, that risk is definitely there. Um, I think there's like these acute like moments, like these glimpses where there's a lot of risk definitely present, and as much as you can, try to mitigate that risk. Um, but I would say, as far as like health wise, like I would say that's probably the most dangerous aspect of it, is just the fact that I'm lifting objective loads that are so heavy that if something goes wrong, it could be pretty bad.
Mm. What do you think about as far as just carrying around a lot of mass? Because I know you're lean, which obviously helps compared to having like super high percentage of body fat. But how do you sort of approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've also made a pact with myself that I would never go above 250 pounds, just because at my size, my height, my stature, it wouldn't make sense to go past that body weight and to be healthy. Um, so for me, right now I'm 230 pounds. I'm pretty comfortable. Um, Blood pressure is good, resting heart rate is very low still, and just generally healthy, but definitely carrying around more mass is definitely something to consider and think about. I was like, hey, like 242 weight class, like I think I can cap it off there and I'll get as strong as as I need to be to win and put up, crazy numbers. But to go past that, like to 275 plus, like I wouldn't want to do all that. That's to me, that's where it crosses the threshold in the realm of being healthy, at least for me. For other people, say people, who are like much taller and whatever, like if they can, carry that weight fine and it suits their stature, their frame better, then sure, go for it. But for me, I'm an average height guy. I'm not, 6'3". Like I don't want to weigh 275, 280 plus, I'd much rather be, a more manageable body weight where I don't feel lethargic. I don't feel like shit. I can move around. I can run. I can climb. I can, do everything.
What do you think you'd be right now if you were to die down for a show?
Well, I'm 230 right now. I'd probably go down to 210 or 215, maybe even for the first one, just to kind of get my feet wet. I don't know what the exact weight categories are, but 15 to 20 pound, loss, just get my feet wet, get into it, see what the competition looks like, see how I need to get better. And then from there, I would start to go down more if need be to like 200, 205, 210.
Mhm. What body fat do you think you're at right now?
Right now, at 230, this is like my first time kind of consistently being at this weight, so definitely higher than usual. Probably like between like I'd say like 15 or 16% probably.
Hmm. What's the lowest you've been and still competing consistently?
Oh, when I was 205, I was always under 10%.
Do you feel a performance difference now being where you are versus then?
Well, I mean, just from having more mass, I think I'm a lot stronger, but I also feel that my leverages have changed quite a bit. Like for certain things, it's a little weird. For me, it's weird. So like for squat, for instance, I feel like my leverages are like insane, like at this weight. Like 220 plus, I feel like my leverages for squat just suddenly get like really good. Um, I mean, I could always squat a lot, even when I was lighter, but well, damn, like now, like I can really squat. Deadlift, I think my leverages were better at 205, to be honest, or sub 220. They're not bad now. I can still definitely probably deadlift more, once it's all said and done on the high end. But I would say the leverages were better at that lower weight class, and pound for pound, I would probably pull better at that weight class. For bench, it really depends. I think my close grip bench is way no, I'd say it was always pretty good. For wide grip, it depends. Um, yeah, I haven't really figured that out yet, to be honest. But I think that's gonna take some time and just sort of maturing to get better at.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would say the leverages just change, for better or worse. But ultimately the net, you know, there's a net gain. Like I am stronger now, of course, at this
Hmm.
big weight.
I do find that interesting because I sort of had the similar experience when I was 215. My squat was amazing, my bench was amazing, and deadlift was good. But when I dieted down to about 180, I noticed my squat and bench, it wasn't the same. It just didn't have the same feel to it as far as the leverages. But my deadlift felt amazing. I felt like I could pull anything.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. When you're lighter, and I feel like when you're lighter, when you deadlift, another thing that people may not consider is your body is probably not as broad and huge, right? So if you're a little more narrow and a little, thinner, you can probably reach down and grab the bar at a point where you actually have to travel overall less distance, and your leverage to get into a good position is also better.
I could see that. Cool. Is there anything you want to say to your new YouTube audience as we wrap it up?
Yeah. Be patient, get in the gym, find your passion, find your why, fall in love with the process, have a good time, have fun.